Alright, this is our second video about the Spanish-American War, aka the Splendid Little War. And we'll get to that in a minute. Alright, now, we did call it the Splendid Little War. Why? 3 months. That's it. 3 months. And it's divided into two theaters. We had the Pacific Theater and we had the Caribbean Theater. Now, in the Pacific Theater, it was about the Philippines, okay? The Caribbean Theater was about Cuba. So, these are the last two really big things that the Spanish have. In addition, they had the famed Spanish Armada. So this is our chance to prove that our Navy is superior. First step in Alfred Thayer Mahan, influence of sea power bond history, okay? So, long story short, do we acquire the Philippines? Absolutely. We liberate the Spanish, and there's a big controversy in that. We'll get there in a minute. Now, our Commodore of this fleet was named George Dewey, and so George Dewey helped to defeat the Spanish fleet. Now, how did he actually do it? He brought in an exiled Filipino leader named Emilio Aguinaldo to actually help cause a lot of disturbances on this. They actually gained, these Filipinos that were helping the Americans gained a little nickname called Little Brown Brother. Maybe that seems a little bit wrong. That's what they called them. And so together they got rid of the Spanish. Now what happens in the Philippines later on, we'll have to go into that because there's a lot of interesting stuff, okay? Now one of the big things we did acquire in the Pacific was the island of Guam. Now Guam has a major U.S. naval base in which we actually maintain a pretty close presence to China and other places like that. And it's a fairly important naval base for us. All right. Now in Cuba, the big story that came out of Cuba was Leonard Wood's outfit, the Rough Riders. Leonard Wood was in charge of it. However, his name's lost in the thing. We always say Teddy Roosevelt. Okay, you see him right there. Teddy Roosevelt recruited these volunteer people to go and fight in this cavalry unit, means none, force called the Rough Riders, okay? And Teddy Roosevelt was one of those. He actually gave up a cushy job as Assistant Secretary of the Navy to go and fight, okay? Now, Frederick Remington was there drawing what was called the Battle of San Juan Hill, and it was the big charge up this hill. Now, they called them Rough Riders, but as you see, a lot of them were on foot, right? Now, something of note that I don't have a picture in here for you, but it brings up the song maybe to think about. Bob Marley actually had a song called Buffalo Soldiers. Buffalo Soldiers refers to a group of African Americans who actually volunteered to fight in the Spanish-American War. And the song is legit about that, so go and give that a listen and see where you're going with that. It's really, really cool. Now, one thing we did acquire at this point was Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico was a U.S. territory before the Spanish-American War. Forces said they would protect Puerto Ricans, but the military insisted on this. Many resented. In 1900, Congress passed the Four-Acre Act, which set up a civil government. And in 1917, Congress made Puerto Ricans U.S. citizens. Now, a couple of days ago, and this is 2016 as I'm telling you this, Puerto Rico actually defaulted on their debts, which means they couldn't pay their creditors back, and they're in a lot of bad situation. And the U.S. actually made a rescue bill, and so it's going to see that goes through Congress or whatever. But another one of those territories we acquired. Now, the number one killer in the Spanish-American War, not bullets, yellow fever. Now, yellow fever has a lot of symptoms. There we go. Red eyes, fever, vomiting, back pain, muscle aches. But probably the ones that everyone recognizes mostly for this is going to be bleeding or hemorrhages of the nose and mouth and eyes, as well as jaundice. Now, jaundice is a yellowing condition of the skin, as well as the pupils of the eye will begin to turn yellow. Okay. Now, a lot of people died from this yellow fever, and they didn't know what was causing it. Dr. Walter Reed discovered what was causing it. It's right there next to him, the mosquitoes. The mosquitoes were spreading this. Now, this is the first time we hear about mosquito-borne illnesses, and right now, I mean, the Rio Olympics are set to start here in a couple of weeks, and there's a major fear about the Zika virus. And the Zika virus is being spread. In addition, mosquitoes have been known to spread West Nile, malaria, and a whole plethora of other bad diseases, all right? But the yellow fever was pretty damaging, okay? Walter Reed basically just discovered, hey, mosquitoes are doing this. Colonel William Gorgas actually came up with a way to treat this, and that is to cover the cesspools, these stagnant waters, ponds, etc., with oil and then set the oil on fire. It's called oil smothering. And this is why, if you've ever seen those mosquito trucks that come down your neighborhood, all you smell is nothing but diesel. They've actually got some diesel oil in there because diesel gives off an oil smell, and then the whole purpose is to attract those mosquitoes there. That's why the mosquitoes will bite you. They're attracted to the oil in your skin. So there you go with that. Now, once we get done with this, we have to have the question, what do we do with Cuba? We said we went at it, right? So the Teller Amendment is replaced with the Platt Amendment. The Platt Amendment said a couple of things. Number one, they're independent, all right? It's not there. Number one, Cuba was not to enter into any agreements with foreign countries that would endanger its independence. Big one here. The U.S. could intervene in Cuba if it was necessary to maintain an efficient independent government. Number three, they must lease Guantanamo Bay, famous for interrogation methods in the Zero Dark 30, etc., to the U.S. for a naval coaling station. And lastly, Cuba must not build up an excessive public debt. And so that's what actually happened with Cuba, all right? Left the Philippines off. That's the subject of the last video we're going to look at, all right?